You can digitize the payroll, but you can't digitize the vibration of a 700-ton turbine spinning at full load. My name is Leonard Vasquez. I'm 58 years old, and for 29 of those years, I was the lead millwright for the Hoover Dam's power generation division. I aligned the Francis turbines, the big ones, the ones that were spun into place before most of our parents were born. I was the last of a certain kind of man. The kid sitting across from me didn't know any of that. He didn't care. His name was Ashton Price Whitman. He was 28. He had a framed Master of Business Administration degree from Princeton on the wall behind his head, positioned so you couldn't miss it. It was so new, the ink probably still smelled. He wore a Patagonia Nano Puff vest over a crisp blue shirt, even though the office was a steady 72 degrees. His hands were soft, manicured. They had never held anything heavier than a latte or the keys to his father's luxury sedan. He wasn't looking at me. He was reading from a script on his monitor. "Leonard," he began, the name feeling foreign and clumsy in his mouth. Everyone on the floor called me Lenny, or Torque. As part of our ongoing workforce modernization and strategic realignment, we've identified several legacy positions that have become redundant in our new operational paradigm. Legacy, redundant, paradigm. The words were meaningless. They were corporate camouflage, meant to hide the simple, ugly fact. He was firing me. After 29 years, 3 months, and 12 days. I didn't say anything. I just watched him. I'd seen his type before. They came in on a wave of buzzwords, rearranged the deck chairs, collected a bonus for increasing efficiency, and were gone in 18 months, leaving the old hands to clean up the mess. But this one was different. This one had the authority to do real damage. If you love stories about underdogs who refuse to stay down and the sweet justice that comes when experience meets arrogance, hit that like button and subscribe right now. You won't want to miss how this plays out. He finally risked a glance at me. His eyes were pale, empty of experience. Your role, specifically, has been flagged for digital transformation. We're moving to a sensor-based predictive maintenance model. The manual alignment protocols are outdated. Outdated. I'd spent my entire adult life learning the language of those machines. Each one had a personality, a unique song it sang when it was happy. Unit 7 had a low hum under full load that sounded like a cello. Unit 4 had a slight whir in its wicket gates. These were things no sensor could ever pick up. It was knowledge earned through touch, through sound, through the vibration that came up from the concrete floor and into the bones of your feet. He was optimizing me, removing the human element, the one element that understood the soul of the machine. "Your official termination date is effective immediately," he said, his voice gaining a rehearsed confidence. "Human Resources has a packet for you. Severance is 60 days' pay, per the standard policy. You'll have 20 minutes to collect your personal items. Security will escort you." He gestured vaguely toward the door. The door is right there. The classic line. A dead calm settled over me. It wasn't anger. Not yet. It was a cold, sharp clarity. The kind you get right before a critical lift, when $1 million piece of equipment is hanging from a crane, and you are the only one who knows if the rigging will hold. I stood up. My chair made no sound on the thick corporate carpet. I looked past him at the framed photo on his credenza. It showed him with a man I recognized, Senator Whitman, a man who sat on the Senate Committee on Energy and Natural Resources, a man who had considerable influence over the budget of the Bureau of Reclamation. It all clicked into place. The kid wasn't a turnaround expert. He was a nepotism hire, sent here to get some management experience before failing upward into a cushy government job in Washington. "I understand," I said. My voice was even. Quiet. He seemed surprised by my lack of protest. A flicker of relief crossed his face. He thought this was going to be easy. He thought I was just some old dinosaur shuffling off to extinction. "Good," he said, turning back to his screen, already dismissing me. Your time here is over. I walked out of his office. The human resources woman gave me the manila envelope with a practiced, sympathetic look. I didn't open it. I walked to my locker, the one I'd had since 1995. I pulled out the faded picture of my wife, Maria, taken at the lookout point a year before she passed. I put it in my wallet. I took my old leather work gloves, stiff with the memory of my hands. I left everything else. The security guard, a good man named Dave I'd known for 2 decades, looked miserable. Lenny, I'm sorry, they just told me. It's not your fault, Dave, I told him, handing over my badge, my access card, the key to the kingdom. He took it like it was radioactive. As I walked across the parking lot to my truck, the afternoon sun felt different, harsher. I stopped and looked back at the massive, beautiful curve of the dam, a monument to a kind of American ambition and engineering that didn't exist anymore. Built by men with slide rules and calloused hands, men who understood that you couldn't fake competence. The concrete beneath my feet vibrated, a faint, steady thrum of immense power being generated. Unit 7 was running at 95% capacity. I could feel it. The kid in the office, with his spreadsheets and his MBA, thought he was in control. He had authority. Yes. But control? Control is a different thing entirely. He thought the dam was a machine of concrete and steel. He was wrong. It was a machine of knowledge. And he had just escorted the most important part of that machine off the property. I climbed into my 1997 Dodge Ram 2500. The Cummins diesel engine rumbled to life, a familiar, reassuring sound. The paint was faded by the Nevada sun. The dashboard was cracked, but the engine was true. I'd rebuilt it myself. I understood it. As I drove away, I didn't look back. I didn't need to. I knew what was going to happen. It was no longer a question of if, but when. That same evening, I didn't tell my kids. My son, Michael, was at Arizona State University studying engineering. My daughter, Sophia, was at Northern Arizona University in pre-med. Maria would have been so proud. The tuition bills were on the kitchen counter. The next one was due in 3 weeks. For a moment, a cold knot formed in my gut. A provider who can't provide is no man at all. But I pushed it down. This was a calculated risk, an exercise in leverage. A lesson I learned not in a classroom, but in the noisy, dangerous guts of a powerhouse. The breaking point came in February 2020. That was when the old plant director, a man named McGregor, retired. He was an engineer's engineer. He came up from the floor, just like I did. He understood the value of institutional memory. He'd fought for years to keep our specialized maintenance programs funded. The day he left, he shook my hand. Lenny, he said, you're the last of the old guard. Don't let these new pencil pushers break what we built. 6 months later, Ashton Price Whitman arrived. He walked the floor once, his shiny Armani loafers completely out of place on the grease-stained concrete. He didn't ask questions. He made pronouncements. He talked about synergy and disruption. He saw our meticulously kept paper logs as an inefficiency, not as a priceless, irreplaceable record of the machine's histories. He saw my team of seasoned millwrights, men with a combined 2 centuries of experience, as legacy overhead. He never learned our names. He just called us the floor crew. Back in 2013, a vibration had started in Unit 5. It was tiny, almost imperceptible. The engineers with their spectrum analyzers and their laptops couldn't find it. They spent 2 weeks running diagnostics, generating reports that said everything was within tolerance. But I knew better. I could hear it. A slight disharmony in the turbine's song. McGregor pulled me aside. What do you think, Lenny? I spent a day just listening, walking the length of the penstock, lying on the concrete floor above the turbine housing, my hand flat against the cool surface, feeling the rhythm. On the second day, I found it. a hairline fracture in one of the stay vanes, caused by a microscopic imperfection in the steel from the original 1930s casting. It was resonating at a frequency the sensors weren't programmed to detect. We shut it down. When they got the housing open, they saw I was right. Another 2 days at full load, and the vane would have sheared off. It would have turned the inside of that turbine into a billion-dollar blender. The lawyers would have been circling for years. McGregor just clapped me on the shoulder. He didn't need to say anything. He was the guy you called when the lawyers were circling. He knew I was the guy you called to keep them away. Ashton didn't know that story. He'd never read the after-action report. To him, it was just a historical data point in a system he was here to optimize. The source of my confidence, the ace I held up my sleeve, wasn't just my experience. It was a piece of paper, a document that was as much a part of this dam's history as the concrete itself. 11 months ago, I had my annual review with Henderson, the new plant director. He was a decent enough man, but weak. He was intimidated by Ashton's political connections. He just wanted to keep his head down. We went through the checklist. At the end, I pointed to the line on my file. Bureau of Reclamation, Class 4 Turbine Alignment Certification. Yeah, Lenny, we know you have it, Henderson said, impatient. What about it? I just want to make sure you understand what it is, I said calmly. It's not a company cert. It's federal. And according to Code of Federal Regulations, Title 43, Subpart 112.7, Paragraph C, any pre-1980. Francis Turbine Unit cannot be serviced, repaired, or certified for operation without a Class 4 holder signing off on the alignment. Henderson waved a hand dismissively. It's a grandfather clause, Lenny. An old rule. We have modern laser alignment systems now. The law doesn't care about lasers, I said. It cares about the signature. And as far as I know, I'm the only one left who has it. He didn't get it. He saw it as a bureaucratic relic. He didn't understand it was a shield. More than that, it was a weapon. The certification process was created in the 1950s. It was designed to ensure that the unique, hand-built nature of these early massive turbines was respected. You couldn't just get the certification. You had to be granted it after a minimum of 20 years of documented hands-on work on that specific class of turbine. My mentor, a brilliant old millwright named Hank Kowalski, was the one who put my name in for it. I remember the day he told me I was ready. We were in the machine shop. He was retiring. He handed me his silver Parker pen, the one he'd used for 40 years. This pen, he said, his voice thick with a Polish accent, has signed off on every major alignment in this powerhouse since 1962. The feds are going to send you a piece of paper. That paper is your authority. But this, he tapped the pen on the workbench, this is your responsibility. Don't ever let some suit who's never had grease under his fingernails tell you how this machine feels. Hank was gone now. So were all the others. I was the last man standing, the last signature on the list. Ashton Price Whitman, with his Princeton MBA and his Patagonia vest, had no idea he was running a powerhouse that was, by federal law, entirely dependent on the man he had just fired. His arrogance was my ammunition. His ignorance was the kill switch. I went home and I waited. I didn't call a lawyer. I didn't file for unemployment. I went into my garage, the one Maria always said I spent more time in than the house. I pulled the cover off my project. A 1969 Ford Mustang Mach 1. A real one, not a clone. I'd been rebuilding it for 10 years. It was my therapy. The engine was on a stand, a 428 Cobra jet, waiting for me to finish the timing. I spent the next 2 days in that garage. I cleaned the carburetor. I torqued the heads, the smell of gasoline and oil, the satisfying click of a wrench on a bolt, the logic of a machine that did exactly what you told it to. It cleared my head. It was a world away from corporate buzzwords and strategic realignments. It was real. My phone stayed silent. I knew Ashton would be strutting around the office, telling everyone how he'd trimmed the fat. He'd be celebrating his victory, completely unaware that he had just disarmed his own battleship. He had the bridge, but I had the keys to the engine room. I knew for sure 3 weeks ago. During a routine inspection of Unit 7, I'd noted a harmonic imbalance that was just beginning to show itself. It was subtle, a vibration that only appeared at 98.7% load capacity and above. The digital sensors, which Ashton loved so much, weren't calibrated for that specific narrow frequency band. They saw nothing. I logged it in my personal notebook, the same one I'd carried for 15 years. I also logged it in the official digital system, but I buried it in the general commentary section, not as a specific fault flag. It was a test. I wanted to see if anyone actually read the details anymore. No one did. The work order was closed with a no fault found status by a junior engineer who trusted his laptop more than my notes. So I waited. I knew they were pushing the grid hard to meet summer demand from Phoenix and Los Angeles. I knew they would push Unit 7 past its normal operating capacity to cover for another unit's scheduled maintenance. They would push it right into the red zone I had identified, and they would be flying blind. The call came on a Wednesday afternoon, 2 days after the humiliation. I was setting the valve lash on the Mustang's engine, my hands covered in grease. The phone buzzed on the workbench. The caller ID said, U.S. Department of Interior. I wiped my hands on a rag and answered. Vasquez. It was Henderson, the plant director. His voice was thin, tight with panic. Lenny, it's Mark Henderson. We have a situation here. I stayed quiet. Let him talk. It's Unit 7, he said, his voice cracking. We had to take it offline. We have a major vibration issue, a catastrophic shaft misalignment. The main bearing is scored. We don't know what happened. Oh, I think you do, I thought. I just said, that's unfortunate. Unfortunate? Lenny, we're down 297 megawatts. The Western Power Administration is screaming. We have engineers from Caterpillar and GE flying in, but they can't touch it. They just looked at the preliminary report and said the damage is severe. I picked up a feeler gauge, admiring its precision. And what does this have to do with me, Mark? My time there is over. Ashton made that very clear. There was a long pause. I could hear the frantic, muffled sounds of the control room in the background. The shrill beeping of alarms. The sound of failure. Lenny, please, Henderson begged. The man's professional life was flashing before his eyes. We need you. Nobody here knows these machines like you do. That's not what your modernization expert said 2 days ago, I replied, my voice as cold and hard as the steel in my hand. He said my role was redundant. He's been relieved of his duties, Henderson stammered. Relieved of his duties or fired? I pressed. There's a difference. One is a gentle exit. The other is a public execution. I wanted the execution. Lenny, for God's sake. Let me be very clear, Mark, I said, cutting him off. I was done waiting. It was time to set the terms. I am no longer an employee. If you want my help, you'll be hiring me as an outside consultant. My consultant rate is $4,000 an hour. That's portal to portal, from the moment I leave my driveway to the moment I return. There is a 10-hour minimum charge per day, whether I work 10 hours or 10 minutes. The silence on the other end of the line was absolute. I could almost hear him doing the math. $40,000 a day. Minimum. And one more thing, I added. Before I touch a single shim, before I even walk into the powerhouse, I want to see a copy of Ashton Price Whitman's signed termination letter. I want it sitting in a manila envelope on the dashboard of my truck when I arrive, not relieved of duties. I want to see the word terminated, for cause, gross negligence. I don't know if I have the authority. Then find someone who does, I said. And while you're at it, have your federal compliance officer look up the Code of Federal Regulations, Title 43, Subpart 112.7, Paragraph C. Read it very carefully. You'll find that without my signature, that turbine never legally comes back online. Ever. You have a $30 million piece of machinery that is currently worth less than scrap metal. My price is my price. I hung up the phone. I didn't wait for a reply. The ball was in his court. I turned back to my engine. The power had shifted. Completely. He had a problem that couldn't be solved with a spreadsheet or a paradigm shift. He needed a man with a specific set of skills. He needed a man with the right signature. He needed me. An hour later, the phone rang again. It was Henderson. "The terms are accepted," he said, his voice flat, defeated. "When can you be here?" "I'm on my way," I said, and hung up. I washed the grease from my hands, but not all of it. I wanted them to see it. I put on a clean pair of jeans and a work shirt. I didn't put on my old uniform. I was not one of them anymore. The drive to the dam was different this time. I wasn't an employee being called in. I was a specialist, a surgeon being brought in for a critical operation. The sun was low in the sky, casting long shadows across the desert. When I pulled up to the security gate, Dave was there. He looked at me, then at the list in his hand. A slow grin spread across his face. He didn't say a word. He just lifted the gate arm and gave me a sharp, respectful nod. I drove to my old parking area. Ashton's prime spot, the one right next to the entrance, was empty. His silver Tesla was gone. I parked my old Dodge Ram right there, in his spot. On the dashboard was a manila envelope. I opened it. Inside was a single sheet of paper. It was a copy of Ashton Price Whitman's termination notice. It was signed by the regional director of the Bureau of Reclamation himself. The reason for termination was listed in cold, black letters. Gross negligence, resulting in critical infrastructure failure and significant financial loss. I left the envelope on the seat. I got out of my truck and walked toward the powerhouse entrance. A group of engineers in hard hats and clean coveralls were standing there, waiting. They looked like lost children. Among them was Henderson. His face was pale. "Lenny," he said, stepping forward. "Thank you for coming." "I'm on the clock," I said, walking past him. I didn't have time for pleasantries. Every minute was costing them more than my old weekly salary. The air in the turbine hall was wrong. It was quiet. The deep, resonant hum of 17 generators producing power was gone. In its place was the dead silence of one of them being offline, and the strained, dissonant sound of the others trying to compensate. The silence was the sound of millions of dollars being lost every hour. I walked over to Unit 7. The yellow caution tape was everywhere. A team of GE engineers stood off to the side, their arms crossed, looking at the silent behemoth with a mixture of awe and fear. They had their laptops and their diagnostic tools, but they were useless. They were mechanics. I was a watchmaker. I put my hand on the turbine housing. It was cool to the touch. Dead. I didn't need their reports or their fancy graphs. I could feel the wrongness of it through the sole of my boots. The soul of the machine was broken. "Clear the area," I said to Henderson, not taking my eyes off the turbine. "I need my tools, and I want my old apprentice, young Ramirez. Nobody else." "But the GE team?" Henderson started. "The GE team can watch," I said, finally looking at him. "From a distance. They are here as observers. This is my operating room." My old toolbox was right where I left it, but it had been moved to a storage cage. Ramirez, a good kid of about 30, brought it out. His face was a mixture of relief and hero worship. "Mr. Vasquez," he said, "it's good to have you back." "Let's get to work, kid," I said. "We're burning daylight." For the next 3 days, that turbine hall was my world. We worked in shifts, but I was there for all of them. I barely slept. The work was brutal, painstaking. We had to disassemble the primary housing, use hydraulic jacks to lift the 180-ton rotor just enough to access the main guide bearing. The bearing was a disaster, scored and warped from the heat and vibration. It was a custom-forged piece of steel the size of a truck tire. There wasn't a spare. Not for a machine this old. Henderson was beside himself. We'll have to order one from a specialty foundry. It could take 6 months. A year. No, it won't, I said. I walked him over to a dusty corner of the machine shop, to a massive wooden crate that hadn't been opened in 50 years. Stenciled on the side were the words, USBOR, Unit 7, Spare Guide Bearing. Assembly, 1935. Hank had shown it to me years ago. Never let them throw this out, Lenny, he'd said. One day, it will be the most valuable thing in this whole dam. Ashton's inventory optimization software had probably listed it as obsolete stock. Recommend disposal. Henderson just stared at the crate, his mouth open. The GE engineers looked at each other in disbelief. Their entire business model was based on just-in-time delivery and planned obsolescence. The idea of having a spare part waiting for 80 years was completely alien to them. It took another 2 days to machine the new bearing to the precise tolerances required and install it. Then came the real work, the alignment. This wasn't something you could do with a laser. It was an art. It involved thousandths of an inch, measured with dial indicators and feeler gauges. It involved understanding how the steel would expand with heat, how the weight of the water would shift the load. I worked in silence. Ramirez handed me tools before I even asked for them. He watched my every move. The suits and the other engineers kept their distance. They were watching a ghost at work, a practitioner of a dead art. On the third day, we were ready. I did the final check myself, running the micrometer over the gap between the shaft and the bearing. Perfect. I stood up, my back aching, my hands raw. Start the flow, I ordered. 10%. The massive penstock valves opened. Water began to flow into the turbine. The shaft began to turn, slowly at first, then faster. I placed my hand on the housing. I closed my eyes. I listened. The vibration was gone. In its place was a smooth, perfect hum. The cello was back in tune. Bring it up to 50%, I said. The hum grew louder, stronger, but it was pure. No dissonance, no harmonics, just the clean sound of immense power under perfect control. Full load. The floor beneath my feet came alive with that familiar, beautiful tremor. Unit 7 was back. It was singing its song. I turned to Henderson. She's good, but she needs to be inspected every 500 hours, not 5,000. And the digital sensors need to be recalibrated to monitor for the specific resonance frequency I'm noting in this report. I handed him my handwritten log. Do not ignore it. He took the notebook like it was the 10 Commandments. We won't, Lenny, I promise. I packed my tools. The whole job took 32 hours of actual work, spread over 3 days. I billed them for the minimum, 30 hours, $120,000. As I walked out, one of the young GE engineers, a kid who looked like he'd just graduated from MIT, stopped me. Sir, he said, I've never seen anything like that. They don't teach that in school. No, son, I said. They don't. The next morning, Henderson called me at home. He offered me a new job. Chief Consulting Millwright, a permanent position. I would report directly to him. I would set my own hours, have veto power over any maintenance procedure on the pre-1980 units, and train a new generation of apprentices, starting with Ramirez. The salary he offered was more than double what I used to make. I accepted. I paid off my kids' tuition that afternoon. All of it. The woman at the bursar's office had to check the numbers twice. I drove home, and for the first time in a long time, the house didn't feel empty. It felt peaceful. I went into the garage, pulled the cover off the Mustang, and got back to work. Not because I had to, but because I wanted to. They learned a valuable lesson that week. They learned that progress isn't always about replacing the old with the new. Sometimes it's about respecting the knowledge that can't be downloaded, the experience that can't be coded. They learned that a framed degree on the wall is just paper, but the grease under a man's fingernails is a record of problems solved and disasters averted. Ashton Price Whitman thought he was cutting dead weight. He didn't realize he was cutting the brake lines. He had the authority to make a decision, but he didn't have the wisdom to understand its consequences. That's the difference between management and leadership. Some assets don't show up on a spreadsheet, and the most valuable things in any organization are the things you can't easily replace. In the end, the machine always tells the truth. It doesn't care about your degree or your title. It only cares if you know how to listen. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Hit that like button if you enjoyed the story. Leave a comment below telling me about a time when experience won out over theory. And make sure to subscribe to the channel for more stories of quiet professionals and the justice they deliver.